Ben Keenan. And Ben's going to talk a little bit about some examples relating to hacking and breaking and making. Some really awesome examples, actually. So without any further ado, I'm just going to pass it over to Ben.
Great, thanks, Scott. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to start off by showing you this. This is a rejection letter that I got from Ken Parker Toys when I was 11 years old during my furiously prolific board game making years. It's actually, truth be told, it's actually one of 6. And there's this poor woman, Maida Beale. I think she had to, it was back in the days, I think, when people had to type things out. She had to type this thing out over and over again as I kept on coming up with all these different ideas for board games, making them out of sticky tape and cardboard and sort of sending them in. Good thing is, though, these rejections didn't deter me from continuing to being creative. I kind of continued to kind of make things, and that's what I do to this very day. I work at an advertising agency called Clemenger BBDO Melbourne. I'm the interactive creative director there, and our motto at Clemenger Melbourne is the work. So everything we do attempts to serve the work, to make it better, to make it more engaging. And this is a piece of work that I guess we're known for. It was called Remote Control Tourist. It was a digital idea at its core, and I guess you could say it had the right shape for a digital idea, and that is what it was the problem being that Melbourne has, unlike Sydney, it doesn't have particularly large kind of postcard-esque kind of sites, but it has all these amazing kind of hidden gems, and they're found down alleyways and such. So what we did is we strapped a couple of webcams to a couple of hipsters, and we let them loose in the streets of Melbourne and allowed people to control their journey via social media. And in doing so, we were creating this real-time story. And it had, this is, I guess, the classic shape of a good piece of digital work, in the sense that it required people to interact with it to actually close that loop. So you actually contribute to the story, and hopefully, if you like the experience, you would share it. But I'm not going to be talking about stuff I do at Clemenger particularly, or the shape of that work at all. What I'm going to be talking about is that no time, no resources, and no budget is actually the best brief ever. I'm going to be talking about, I guess, a style of thinking that I think should be more prevalent in the creative work we do, especially to do with digital, but even to do with creative problem solving in itself. This is a cigarette lighter, okay? It's also a battery, some gaffer tape, a piece of bent up wire with a little bit exposed at the end. What you do is you touch the edge of the wire, and you create a circuit, and you put your cigarette on the little exposed bit, and that lights your cigarette. Whoa. This is a toaster oven for making toast. It's also bits ripped off the metal slats of a bed and some wires that have been ripped out of an old kind of radio. These 2 inventions were created in a German prison. And a German prison is a fantastic place for innovation to occur, because it has all the things innovation needs. It has no resources. Okay, if you're you want to make something, you're stuck with whatever's around you. You suddenly need to look at those things as the sum of their functional parts. It also creates a certain urgency. If you want to kind of light your cigarette after lockdown, or make yourself a warm piece of comforting toast, you're going to have to get creative with what's around you. You're going to have to actually shift your perspective as to what these things are in order to kind of make things. What I like about that kind of thinking is you could argue that these ideas or these inventions are pretty much pure. They've actually been made out of common everyday things that have become so ubiquitous that they're almost invisible, and we've sort of stopped looking at them. We've stopped looking at their functionality and what their possibilities are. This is the internet. Okay, all 11 million pages of it, all running in real time, with all of our popular culture and our opinion all mashed in together. Now, this is the opposite of a German prison. There's no scarcity in here. And so I'm of the belief that I think we need to kind of create our own scarcities and our own constraints in order to sort of force more ingenuity in our thinking. Because having no resources and no budget and no time is the foundation of some of our biggest sort of cultural movements. In the 1970s, in the Bronx, African American kids couldn't get into Manhattan nightclubs, so they took the scant resources that were around them. They took their parents' James Brown records, and they created block parties, and that evolved into hip hop. And just over the Atlantic, you had young disaffected youth in the UK, suffering under Thatcherism, and deeply angered by the lack of kind of opportunity. That fueled itself into kind of picking up instruments and making music, and there was a whole bunch of surplus army gear available around that time, which was being made for a Falklands War that they didn't know what was happening, which is incredibly cheap, and that informed all the fashion, and that informed all the movements around punk rock and all the things that came around that. There's a really interesting thing that about punk rock and hip hop is that it's almost as if there are no two larger movements that have ever come through popular music in the last 20 years. The creative technologist Jaron Lanier, he coined the phrase virtual reality. He pointed out something really interesting in an essay, and that was that it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to isolate music that's been created between 2000 and 2010. And the reason being is we've started feeding back on ourselves because of the prevalence of the internet. We've started mashing things together, which in one way you could argue is probably creative, but in another way, it means that perhaps we're suffering from too much resources, and perhaps we need to put a bit more scarcity into our thinking to come up with some really novel and really innovative solutions. I guess this is the nature of what hacking is, hacking in the modern sense, breaking things down to the sum of their parts and bringing it back together. And that could be, the sum of the parts of things like the functional elements of tools and technology. It can also be the functional parts of people and their backgrounds and their skills, and mixing those things together. Some examples of some really, really interesting sort of ways of hacking things together. This photo was taken in a hospital in Indonesia soon after the Boxing Day tsunamis. This is what that hospital was doing for low-weight birth babies in lieu of not having working incubators. And it wasn't the fact that they didn't have incubators, they did. They were donated lots of different incubators. The problem was they couldn't fix them because they didn't have the expertise or the specific medical instrumentation in order to kind of keep the upkeep of these machines. So this was seen by an industrial designer called Timothy Prestero. And what he did is he, instead of kind of, if often a lot of us are kind of creative people in the room, if we're greeted with this problem, I guess we sort of start thinking, well, it's a people problem. Perhaps we should kind of, mobilize people and get a better distribution chain of the parts they need or the expertise. But, Timothy did one better. He looked at what a baby incubator is. And when you look at it, what it is, it's warmth and it's air circulation and it's power. So he created this, which is called the neonatal, which is a baby incubator built out of truck parts. The most utilitarian and most commonplace of trucks that you sort of see in all edges of the earth. So he realized that the dash fan does the circulation, the headlamps does the warmth, and of course the car battery powers the whole thing. And again, a really amazing way to actually solve the major problem is of not being able to kind of keep the upkeep of a baby incubator, being that all you need is a mechanic and someone who knows how to fix cars in order to keep this thing running. Another really common thing that we use every day is Facebook, even to the point where its functionality and how we use it is almost invisible. There was a really horrifying phenomenon happening in the Philippines a few years ago, in the sense that people were taking indiscreet videos of women kind of in intimate acts, essentially kind of emulating some of the sort of sex scandal videos we sort of see in Hollywood. And this is becoming a really terrible kind of trolling epidemic. And the word scandal was kind of the language that was kind of, prevalent in order taking these videos, putting them up and defaming people in what is a very, conservative country. So a creative called Astro Gutierrez came up with this idea, which was called the Gabriella project to bury the past. And it was one of the simplest solutions in order to kind of stop this from happening. What they asked people to do was to change your name in Facebook and put the word scandal in it. And tens of thousands of people did when word got out, and they buried the word scandal in search results, and then also buried the act of kind of this horrible kind of phenomenon taking place. Blink 182 noticed that there were thousands of people using their music illegally on YouTube. But they also noticed what the intent of these people were. It's because they were fans. So instead of going and pulling the music down, which often kind of happens if we kind of, self-create our own videos, what they did was they created the film festival you didn't know you entered. They basically turned on a webcam and actually started giving out prizes to all these people, all these kids who were kind of putting Blink 182 on their skate videos, and then later created their next music video with a mashup of all these videos they found. Again, it was an idea kind of built out of nothing. They built it by turning on a webcam and conceptually grabbing all the content that was there and just reframing it and rewarding their fans as they did it. Again, a fantastic demonstration of just understanding, the behaviours and the motivations of your fans and making something, deeply creative out of seemingly nothing. One of my favourite ideas of last year happened by this band called Wolfpack. We're all very familiar with Spotify and the controversies around Spotify and how low the actual kind of royalty rate is when you play songs. So Wolfpack did this amazing hack on Spotify where they realized that basically if you played an album for 8 hours, you could generate $4. So they created an album called the Sleepify album, which was just 8 tracks of pure silence. And they asked friends and family to play that album constantly for 2 weeks. And people did, and they made $20,000 off Spotify in order to fund their tour. Again, a fantastic example of using something that's so ubiquitous and just taking the mechanics of it and reordering it and doing something seamlessly amazing in gaming the system. Occupy Sandy were a relief group set up in Brooklyn when Hurricane Sandy came through New York City. And they realized a problem, and that was there were a whole bunch of people in need of aid, in need of specific things, and also a whole bunch of people around America observing all the hardships of the people in New York City who wanted to give aid. So they did something which I think is ingenious, which is they basically set up an Amazon wedding registry. Okay, the people in need became brides and grooms in need, and they got to post up in the wedding registry the stuff they need. Everyone else who wanted to give, they became wedding guests, and they basically paid for the needs of those needs. And they managed to move $250,000 worth of needful things over to the people that they needed during the time, using Amazon's distribution system to get it there. Again, an amazing look at what actually is a wedding registry. Well, it's actually an aid distribution system if you look at it in the right way. This guy in the corner is called Julian von Bismarck, and he's holding what's called a fugulator. It looks like a camera, but it's actually not. It's actually a projector. And what Julian has invented is he's used what's called a slave. That's a device that recognizes the flash of a camera, and often it's used to trigger kind of fill lights. You've probably sort of seen it inside of a photographic studio. But what Julian does is he goes to these various events and he projects words or symbols. And what happens is when people take flash photographs, the fugulator blasts out a projection onto a space. So when you take your photo, you don't actually see anything. But when you look back at it, and you've been taking photos of the Pope at his inauguration, the word "no" will be projected up above the Pope. Or when you're going to see Barack Obama do a speech in front of an audience. In the southern states of America, when you take your flash photograph, you look back, you're going to see a crucifix projected onto his podium when you actually develop your photos. And again, a great example of someone just using tools and sort of bringing them together in a different way and using that as a form of activism. I was sort of slightly inspired by this in the sense of kind of trying to use a flash in a different way to create something slightly less crucial or slightly less activist than that is an app I created called Look Birdie last year. I'll sort of show you how it works.
Here's a test.
Yeah? Okay, here's a test. Okay. That works. So again, kind of a slight and a trite and a silly idea. Basically, the idea came from I just wanted to try and make an app using the fewest moving parts possible. So I just sort of realised, well, I'll try and twist the flash and make that kind of work as an attractor, and create sort of bird noises. Because I remember, like, when I was a kid, everyone told me to kind of look at the birdie. So again, trying to use things, using the functionality of things in a way that's not intended to kind of solve a problem. This is an idea, because I guess I'm a really big fan of this kind of thinking, trying to create stuff out of the fewest resources possible, because I guess it allows stuff to get creative and makes it an easier, less of a barrier for people to interact with it. Something really common that we use every day are form captures when we're buying tickets to events. And one of our clients at Clemenger is the Transport Accident Commission. And so they sponsor lots of events because they want you to get home safely when you're driving a car. So this is an idea we're working at with our partners Solve Media, and that's to kind of take the capture and to, instead of just making it sort of gobbledygook, we want to turn those into pledges that I will not speed, I'll look after my friends, I will not drink drive. And in doing so, there's something in your brain that sort of happens when you actually write and pledge something. There's that cognitive dissonance effect that comes into effect, that makes you sort of be consistent with your words and actions. And I guess, this sort of has that sort of shape, that sort of shape of an idea. We're sort of using something that's already in there. So there isn't a great deal of kind of need to kind of build anything. Essentially, all we need to build to make this idea happen is to kind of create these graphics. There's an urgency in the sense that you have to do this anyway. You have to kind of prove that you're human in order to kind of come through and make sure you're not a person who's scalping when buying your tickets. I guess it does create a perspective shift in the sense that when you're doing an idea like this, I guess that idea of are you proving that you're human, brings about a twist on what that means. Is proving you're human, proving you're not a computer, or is proving you're human promising to basically be responsible on roads? So I guess, what's next? This is, we're all here at Pause Fest, and we're all sort of, looking around, trying to make sense of kind of what's just over the horizon, and, I get as excited by, wearable tech and the possibilities of data and the possibilities of social as anyone. But I guess what I'm really curious about is, perhaps, we've misread what innovation can be. Perhaps innovation isn't always something that's in the future. And perhaps we need to kind of start looking around at existing technology, at antiquated technology, and even things that aren't technology in order to see them as their sum of their parts. Because, essentially, innovation perhaps isn't always ahead of us, but perhaps, in order to solve really big and significant problems, it could be just waiting to be discovered in what's already here. Thank you.
What I liked about that was that there's not only sort of like aligning around a specific need or that type of thing, but then also using scarce resources to put things together. And to your last slide, using things that are already there, but using them for maybe a different purpose. And I love the Bird app. I'm totally going to grab that for my son.
It's free, and it's in the App Store.
Does anybody have any questions for Ben?
Do non-for-profits actually go searching for technical help? I don't know if anyone can answer this as a whole. Is that something that they go searching for, crowdsourcing for? I mean, obviously we have the brains to give it to them.
Yeah, I know they do. I mean, I've done a bit of work for the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, and in helping them with trying to solve their sort of technical problems. I guess it's interesting because a lot of these ideas are sort of based out of the actual. Sometimes the technology is where the idea actually came from. It's actually looking at that in a different way. So sometimes you're solving problems that aren't actually in a brief. It's almost seeing that and going, that could be appropriate for this need or this cause. So it's not always, something that's sort of, I guess this kind of thinking is not always specific to, who you're trying to do it for.
The other thing I'm curious to get your take on is the degree to which innovation or hacking and that type of thing is a personality trait, like something that's just like inherent in someone, versus a skill set where they know how to cobble things together and they're always looking for ways to cobble things together. What's your take on that?
I think it is a skill. Well, it can be. I think we've all got different skill sets. I think I'd argue that you can sort of say that hacking comes from sort of bringing elements together, different kind of elements from different kind of walks. And I think creative people, anyone who is, got a slight inkling of being creative, actually loves collaborating with others. Because there's a good habit I've sort of noticed in creative people. Like creative people are like vampires. They tend to kind of suck the kind of talents and the energy of others. So when you get a whole bunch of people together who are really interested in actually, coming up with ideas, you can create those sort of situations, and that's, I'm a big believer in that. I think we were chatting about that earlier. Like one of the most wonderful things at the moment is, events like this bring all these different kind of people of different walks together, who enjoy exchanging ideas, and because essentially ideas are just the product of more ideas sort of mashing together. So I think, to answer your question, I think it's sort of, it's inherent in everybody. Everybody's skills are valid in this sort of process of just sort of adding in. I guess we just almost need to kind of think of better ways to be able to kind of collaborate with each other. That's probably the challenge.
Great, thanks. Murray?
Whoops.
Is this on? Oh, there we go. That was amazing. Thanks, man. I know you're a proud father. How has becoming a parent influenced some of this thinking, if at all?
I think it does. I think it's the same. I think being a parent kind of forces you to be creative anyway, because kids are really creative. Do you know what I mean? Like you can take, that's why kids, often, throw the toy away and start sort of playing with the box, and suddenly the box becomes a boat, and then you tip it on the side, and the box becomes a rocket ship. Kids have that sort of natural ability to kind of see things in a way we don't. And I guess we kind of lose that because we get sort of focused in kind of what things should be and what their purpose should be in the sensible world. And then, I guess trying to find that sort of innocent way at kind of looking at things is a little bit probably close to some of this stuff I'm kind of talking about, I think. So I reckon definitely it's sort of influential.
Hi, Ben. Great talk. Quick question. Some of the ideas, like the capture idea, is a real genius idea, but you've used it for one client. So how do you balance the demands of having to have a new idea versus an idea that's already a good idea, but you've already used it elsewhere?
I think that's an interesting kind of question, because sometimes you do come up with ideas and go, that could be appropriate for this client. And then you sort of realise after a while, no, it could be actually appropriate to this client, especially it has like a sort of a human aspect to it. I guess the general rule is when someone's actually paying you for your creativity and you've actually shown them an idea, you've kind of shown them that idea and it's theirs to say yes or no to. So you kind of have to ask their permission in order to kind of move it on to something else. But look, one of the interesting things we do, especially at sort of Clemenger, is that we sort of prize originality. Like there's often those things when you put so much heart and so much effort into an idea that you really, really love, and you sort of realise, it's been done before, or been done in a sense where it stops making it kind of unique and special, and you have to kind of completely reboot. And occasionally you have to reboot with just the resources you've been left with. You may have already kind of booked certain things or engaged certain talents, and then you've got to do that thing of trying to make a new idea work or sort of shift it, which I guess brings in, part of that, some of that thinking I was sort of talking about. Like when you suddenly do make things hard for yourself, though, that 2 days you've got to force a solution, often kind of, gives you some surprising results.
Just following on from that, what pressures do you feel from clients where they want to see creative thinking measurable, I suppose?
Well, I think, no, definitely. I think all creative thinking needs to be measurable and accountable, and that's something that I strongly believe in. You need to be doing things that are, we all know, it's funny where I'm from in this sort of, in the world of kind of advertising, they have things like awards, which are kind of, often measured for, an idea's sort of creative merit. But there's also effectiveness that is so, so important. And we can see now if an idea is working, especially in the online space, because people are actually engaging with it. I think in some of the stuff I've been sort of showing here, what's interesting about when you start creating ideas out of things that are already there, I think you're giving them a really good chance of being effective. In one sense, because you're building things out of things people use every day, which are form fields within Ticketmaster, or using Facebook in an interesting way, you've actually taken away the usability problem, because it's stuff we know how it works every day. You've just sort of shifted it slightly, so its barrier to entry has kind of dropped. So I think that's kind of really important. I think that for that reason, that sort of helps you to come up with ideas that are going to be effective and are easy for people to embrace. But I totally agree. Like effectiveness and doing ideas that kind of work, and some of these ideas that have been in all aspects have been so successful that they've actually generated news about themselves. And I guess that's what I think makes this kind of thinking really, really, really potent.
I love the app idea. What sort of process did you go through in determining whether that becomes a side project, which it sounded like it was, or you use it for a client? So your job's coming up with ideas. When do you save them up and use them on a client? When do you turn it into a side project?
Well, I guess I actually chose that. I actually wanted to do a creative project where I kind of did all the elements myself. I got a great bit of help with the programming on that from my friend Reece Sullivan. But my background was being a web designer and a developer, and then I became a copywriter. And I wanted to kind of bring back some of those sort of skills. So I did that project as generally a side project, and I had kids, and that's what inspired it. So it really was just it was one of those projects I felt I needed to do that, because occasionally, I'm sure a lot of people agree in the room, I think every creative person needs side projects outside of their work. Something that you can have control over, because there are so many variables going on with stuff you're doing for clients. It's just sort of something I wanted to own. So that manifested out of a desire, purely to do that. And also, just sort of complete something end to end and go through that process and sort of see how that kind of went. And also try something. It was actually the laziest idea I could think of. It had the fewest moving parts. And as I found out later on when I put it together, it was really bloody hard to actually kind of get something like that actually working. But yeah.
The laziest idea. That's good. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, cool. We're going to move on then. Thanks a lot, Ben. That was really great.
Thank you.